Hello everyone and welcome to the Sofia Backpack sew-along video. If you've stumbled across this video and would like to join in making this backpack, see the link in the description for the PDF print-at-home pattern and sewing kit. Let's get started. To make this backpack, you will need one main body piece cut from your outer fabric, one main body piece cut from your lining fabric, 2 gussets cut from your outer fabric, 2 gussets cut from your lining fabric, 1 inner pocket cut from your lining fabric and a matching zipper, some webbing for the straps, 2 strap webbing tabs and 2 D-rings, 2 adjuster rings, some bias binding, optionally a Sewing with Sofia logo, a button, and 2 pairs of snap buttons. For more details on the dimensions and specifications for all these, see the links to the PDF pattern in the description. You will also need to have a pair of fabric scissors, some sewing pins and/or clips, some matching thread, a hand sewing needle, a tool to set the snap buttons, a fabric marker or tailor's chalk, and a ruler or measuring tape. If you have purchased the PDF pattern, please make sure you have cut all the correct pieces and made your markings. You can skip ahead to the timestamp shown on screen. For those of you who have the kit, I'm going to show you how to make the markings on your pieces without needing to print out the PDF pattern. You can also find these in your instruction booklet, or you can print out the PDF pattern and copy the markings across. On your main body outer piece, mark the placement of your strap buckles 52 centimeters down from the top of the flap and 2 centimeters in from the sides. Then measure 22 centimeters down from the top of the flap and mark 6.5 centimeters in from either side for your top handle and strap placement. Then measure 23 centimeters down from the top of the flap and make a small mark on either side. This is your start and stop sign for sewing the flap together. On your main body lining piece, measure 27 centimeters down from the top of the flap and mark. Then mark the middle of your lining piece vertically to that line. This is your inner pocket placement. On your strap, fold in half and mark the middle. Then measure 8 centimeters out on either side to form the 16 centimeter long top handle. With those markings made, we can start to sew. Taking your strap webbing tabs, thread each one through one of the D-rings and fold in half. Sew along the raw edges, closing the loop with a zigzag stitch. I tend to set my width to about 1.8. Taking your main body outer, sew the strap webbing tabs onto the markings. Sew in a square shape to strengthen them. Once your tabs and D-rings are attached, it's time to sew on the straps at the top to form the top handle. Sew these on at a 45-degree angle. This will allow space for your shoulders and make the backpack more comfortable. Then, fold each side of the top handle over the stitching line and line it up with the rest of the strap. We're going to sew another line of stitching here to reinforce the handle, but also to give it a bit more shape. The fabric might pucker a bit as you pin and sew each side, but don't worry, it will lie flat once it's all sewn down. Sew this second line of stitching as close to the edge of the fold as you can. I usually aim for between 1 and 2 millimeters away. When sewing on the straps and top handle, don't be afraid to sew over the same line a couple of times, just to make sure your stitching is strong. Here's what the back will look like. 2 parallel lines of stitching for each side of the top handle. Now we're going to put the main outer piece away for a bit and tackle the inner pocket. Place your inner pocket right side up on your table and then place your zipper right side down on top of either of the short ends of the pocket. Pin or clip along the zipper and pocket edge. Turn the pocket right side down and, using a zipper foot, stitch along the outside edge of the zipper. Lay your pocket out again right side up and fold the zipper down underneath it. At this point you can iron that seam down if you like, but honestly I just tend to press it down a little with my fingers. Pick up the side with the zipper attached and fold it over, good sides together, to meet with the other short edge of the pocket piece. Pin or clip along that edge. Flip the pocket over and sew along that edge with a zipper foot just as we did before. You will now have a pocket tube. Rotate the pocket tube to align one edge of the zipper tape to a folded edge of the pocket tube. Pin or clip along the 2 open edges of the tube. Before you sew along those edges, open your zipper. This will allow you to turn the pocket right side out after stitching. Sew along the two edges, backtracking a little over the zipper teeth to secure them. If you're using a metal zipper, be careful not to break your needle. Taking your fabric scissors, cut the two ends of the zipper off as close to the seam as you can, but don't clip the seam. Open your zipper the rest of the way and pull the pocket through. Press the pocket well. Measure the middle of your inner pocket. Place the inner pocket on top of the lining along the marking with the two center marks aligned. Pin in place. Sew along the top of the pocket 2 mm away from the edge. We're now going to sew the flap together. Lay your main outer piece right side up on your table and place your main lining piece on top right side down. Pin or clip all the way around the flap, making sure to clearly mark your starting and stopping points. Sew all the way around the flap, turning sharply at the corners. Now, as I was filming this bit, my camera died, but after you've sewn around, you'll want to clip the corners to reduce bulk and turn the flap right side out. Press well. I always like the outside to look best, so a little tip is to press the lining in just a touch, less than 1 mm, and press it down there. Continue going around the edges of the flap, pressing well. This technique will give you a bit of bubbling excess lining in the middle of the flap, but I promise this won't be visible later on. Just make sure you only press in towards the middle and down from the top of the flap. From now on, we're going to be treating the main outer and main lining pieces as one, since they are attached to the flap. Time to attach the gussets and finally turn this 3D. Lay your main piece right side up on your table. Make sure the outer and lining sides are aligned. Take your outer gussets and place each of them wrong sides together with a lining gusset. We will be treating these as 2 gusset pieces. Now, this part is a little hard to explain and I'm sure that it's tricky to visualize, but these gusset pieces are going to attach to the lining on 3 of their sides to form the rectangular shape of the bag. Place one of the gusset pieces right side down on top of the main body, aligning its bottom and side edge. Pin or clip in place. Now pick up that gusset piece and rotate it 90 degrees so that its short edge is in line with the continuation of the main body piece. Clip in place. Pick the piece up again and rotate once more, aligning the second long edge of the gusset with the side of the main body. The top of your gusset should fall around where the straps are attached, possibly slightly higher than them. Clip in place. At this point, check that the corners you've created are sitting well, not too tight, not too loose. You want it to be as smooth as possible to stitch over. Here you have an option. If you want to make sure that everything is properly aligned and that you're happy with the shape of the bag, or if you're fairly new to sewing and want to make your life easier when it comes to attaching the bias binding, I recommend sewing all around those 3 sides of the gusset to secure it to the main body, and repeating with the other side to form the full bag. If you're more confident, feel free to start applying the bias binding now, as I will show. Place one of your sides, which is attached to the flap, into the sewing machine. Taking your bias binding, open one side of it and align the raw edge with the raw edges of the main body and gusset. Make sure you leave a little bit of extra bias binding, a couple of centimeters, so that you can fold it over later and make a clean edge. Secure the bias binding along that edge and sew along the unfolded line of bias binding. If you're a beginner and you're a little confused at this stage, I recommend watching a video about how to apply bias binding to gain an understanding of where I'm heading with this. Eventually, we're going to fold the bias binding over the raw edge of the seam and conceal it completely. So start sewing your bias binding onto the seam. As we approach the corner, let me show you how to tackle these. So here I am sewing my bias binding onto my seam. As I approach the corner, I'm going to sew as close to it as I can, approximating my seam allowance. Then, lifting my presser foot but leaving my needle in the fabric, this is important, I'm going to pivot the bag so that the next edge is aligned with my needle and push all the other fabric out of the way towards the back. The secret to getting this right and not sewing through the wrong layers is simply to keep all your layers tidy. Push out any corners so that you always know where each piece of your fabric is and keep the edge you're sewing down aligned with the lines on your needle plate. I did my best to film this well for you, I hope it helps. Here's another corner. As I come up to it, I sew as close as I can, approximating my 5mm seam allowance, then lift the presser foot but leave my needle in, grab the next seam and use it to pivot my fabric out of the way and align the next seam properly. I then make sure all my layers are aligned, lower the presser foot, and continue. So once you've sewn the bias tape onto one side, this is what you'll have. Repeat the process on the other side. I've deliberately left all these clips of me doing the other side in, so that hopefully they can give you an overview of the process and illuminate any points of confusion. Please enjoy this lovely music and the super speed of my sewing hands. Now, although at the two outer edges where the flap connects, you'll need to leave a little bit of extra binding, as I said before, at the two middle edges, shown here, you can cut the binding down to align with the edge of the top seam. This will soon be hidden by, you guessed it, more bias binding. Now it's time to fold the binding over the raw seams. Don't forget to hide those little extra tabs that we left to make clean edges where the gusset connects to the flap. As you go round, snip any corners or bits where there's too much fabric so that the binding has enough space to fold over tidily. Continue pinning all the way round. Sew your bias binding down over the raw edges, sewing close to the edge of the binding. The idea is that you're trying to conceal the first row of stitching you made when attaching the binding by sewing just one hair further in. And here we go! The main shape of the bag is done, seams hidden under bias binding, sharp corners, straight lines, beautiful. Now, time to attach the snap buttons. Make sure you have two pairs and place one pair on either side of the bag at opposite ends at the top of the gusset. Leave about 1 centimeter of space between the raw top seam and your snap, as we'll be sewing more binding in here. To get the most crisp shape, place the snaps as close to the bias bind seam as possible. A good way to make sure your snaps are aligned with each other is to fold the gusset in half once you've placed the first one, then you can place the other one perfectly opposite. Make sure the male and female parts of your snaps, the ones that do all the work, are on the outside of the bag. Alright, we're almost there now. Just need to cover the top seam with some more bias binding. As before, leave a bit extra on either side to fold in later. Make sure that you start sewing the bias binding from the inside so that you can then fold it over and have a nice clean edge on the outside. As you sew over the exposed tops of the inside seams, angle them to cover the back of the snap poppers for a cleaner look. Be careful and go slow when you sew over the snap poppers. Don't break your needle. Once you've sewn one side of the bias tape down, fold over the raw edge, fold the ends in, and sew again as neatly as possible. Your backpack is almost done. Raw seams are covered, it's got its unique shape, it should be looking very pretty right about now. It's time to turn it right side out and marvel at your handiwork.
Oh yeah!
Amazing!
We're on to the final touches. Up first, the buttonhole. Measure the middle of your bag with the side snaps closed and make a buttonhole. How you do this depends on your machine and the button you're using. I'm lucky enough to have a machine that does one-step buttonholes, but they can be done on any machine in many different ways. Always test your buttonhole on a spare piece of fabric first. You really don't want to ruin your project at this stage. Once you're happy with your result, move on to your main piece. Align your bag again and carefully open your buttonhole to mark your button placement in the middle. Sew on your button by hand or by machine if you can. Please note that the buttons included in the kits cannot be sewn by machine as they are not flat. If available, sew your Sewing with Sofia logo on as well. Thread each strap through one of the strap adjusters and D-rings as shown. Sew down the raw edges of the strap with a zigzag stitch, forming a loop through the middle prong of the adjuster. Ta-da! You have your finished Sewing with Sofia backpack. Well done for getting this far and for making your beautiful backpack. We really hope you love it. Thanks so much for supporting Sewing with Sofia and all of our sustainability efforts. You can find all of our links down in the description and purchase the PDF pattern or the kit as you like. Please also don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, and follow us on Instagram. Thanks for watching!